This time I'll call to order a public hearing. We're going to immediately put that public hearing on hold. We're going to adjourn that, table that, and we're going to go ahead and start the regular meeting for the spotlight recognitions, and then we'll come back to the public hearing. So, at this time, I call this meeting of the Bryan Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present, and that this meeting has been duly called, and that notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code Chapter 551. I wish to extend a warm welcome to everyone present. Citizens may make comments about topics relevant to district business. Topics should be limited to 3 minutes. Comments concerning specific students or personnel will be held in closed session. As you turn off the sound on all electronic devices, and please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor
the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
All right, and at this time we will move down into the spotlight recognition. I'd like to invite up the National Technology Students Association TSA competition.
Good evening, board. Dr. Whitbeck, thank y'all. Last year we had several of our CT programs compete at regional and state competition. And I think this was the first time that many of them were virtual, but yet we were very, very successful this year in many of those competitions. I just wanted to highlight a few of them. First of all, our C-Tech welding program produced the #1 welder in the state of Texas this year. And then our rudder welding program produced the #2 welding student in the state this last year, so we're very proud of that. We also had our C-Tech construction trades program placed 3rd in the state in plumbing competition, so we're very proud of that as well. And one thing I want to mention that we have several of our career and technical student organizations. We have several students who are now taking leadership positions. We have regional officers as well as state officers. So I commend the teachers for working with these students to take on these leadership roles. But anyway, tonight we're here to recognize our CD program at Stephen F. Halton Middle School, who have found once again competed and won national recognition in the Texas Student Association. So I'm going to call Mr. Naveen and Mr. Parker up. Y'all come on up and tell us about the competition and what y'all accomplished. And they brought some students with them. And I think I saw a big old trophy somewhere. I'll let them get up and tell you about it.
Good evening. I'll let Parker introduce the students, but I just wanted to start it off by saying in 2020, I mean, we've been doing this now for I think 5 years, and our goal as a program is to always improve on the results from the previous year. Just constant improvement, and kind of like what we do with our students in the classroom. So those were our expectations. In 2020, we were on par with that. We went through regionals, did really well, and then COVID hit, and there was no state and national competition. In 2021, we meet as an Odyssey team every week, and I told them at the beginning of the year, I said, we are going to, no matter what happens, no matter what comes along, we will provide the best Odyssey experience we can, regardless of what's going on, mask, sneeze guard, wipes, all that kind of stuff. We'll take it, but we're going to provide the best opportunity we can and just keep that goal in mind. And with that, we did better in regionals, did better in state, and yes, nationals were virtual, but we still participated. And I'll let Parker carry on the rest of that. But just wanted to say thank you for your continued support from all levels of the district.
Before I start to announce some of our students and recognize how well they did at nationals this year, I did want to kind of tag on with Mr. Puna on saying thank you. The things that we get to do with our students and what our students get to be a part of is incredible. Bryan ISD provides the best opportunities, and we're very thankful for that. It comes from y'all, from the CTE department. Anything we ask for, they're like, how can we help? We want to help y'all. We want to do everything we can to make sure that you and your students are successful. So first of all, let's say thank y'all for that. This year, aside from what we did with nationals, we had a teams competition this year, which some of our students here were actually part of that team as well. Unfortunately, they did not host a national competition this year, but they did earn first and second place in the state of Texas this year. So they would have gone to nationals, but they didn't hold that competition this year. So, but as far as nationals go, our fourth place team in technical design was, go ahead and stand up guys, once I call your name. Joshua Steinschneider here in the front, 8th grader going to Bryan Collegiate this year. And Mr. Stephen Strong is going to be with us again as an 8th grader this year. So congratulations on that. And our national champions, the XIQ team, Joshua Steinschneider, Rial Rawls, and Noah Draper. Thanks again for all your support, and very excited for these kids.
Now, parents, take some pictures. Turn that way. Like a bunch of ducks. You can get up and move around, whatever they can do. How's that look, Matt? Good? Stay still for your hands. Keep smiling. What parents?
I just want to thank you guys and the leadership of this. I mean, good group, and your rest of your team, that y'all do such a fantastic job. Y'all been a hero of mine for a long time, because y'all have brought special recognition to our district and great opportunities for these kids. It's a great admirer. So thank you very much.
And we know they put in a lot of additional hours. Thank you, gentlemen. Good evening. I come to you as the proud athletic director of the Lady Vikings softball team, regional finalists last year. It was an awesome experience, great games. We're sitting there, and when the home run went over the fence, the last out, and I was sitting by Mrs. Waller, and she jumped up and went crazy. I went, this is a good time. So they lost by 1 run, otherwise they'd have made a trip to the state tournament, and just did an awesome job. I'd like to introduce you to Enrique Luna. Enrique has been named the 6A Coach of the Year in the district. He's been named by the Eagle to be the Brazos County Softball Coach of the Year. And he and his staff have been nominated for the NFCA South Central Regional Staff of the Year. And we'll find out on Friday if they were named to that position. But it's been an awesome experience. We have most of the team in the back of the room. Yeah. Just a fun spring, and next year look forward to more. But at this time, I'd like to introduce Coach Enrique Luna to hand out some awards.
You know, Coach Luna was a Bryan High quarterback.
A couple moves back. Good evening. Thank you guys for having us. I couldn't be more proud as an alumni of not only the things that we do on the field, but the things that we do off the field. And it's always, they will be the first ones to tell you that we always talk about representing our community both on and off the field. And the things that we were able to do last year was remarkable, not only but the way that we came together as a team, considering everything that was happening. but also the way the community rallied around us. Even now, walking around, people telling you, hey, well, it's a tremendous job you did. That just gives you chills because of the fact that these young ladies put in a lot of work. June 8th of last year, the UIL allowed us to come back on the field, and we came back after having 3 months off, and they didn't question it. They bought in. Our staff, Coach Gutierrez is here tonight with us. They bought in, and we knew what the ultimate goal was. And like Coach Winfrey said, unfortunately we fell short, but top 8 in the state in Class 6A was remarkable, setting a record for wins last year, setting a record for home runs. She talked about the ball flying out. It flew out a lot last year. And I think some cars on Cambridge may have come close to getting hit last year several times when we played at home. But tremendous job, and I wanted the young ladies to be here because they deserve a little bit of recognition. Like Coach Winfrey said, we did have a couple of our seniors that were named to All-American team. We're going to miss them. They're 4-year starters for us. But we know they're going to do great things. They actually are leaving tomorrow to the University of Louisiana Lafayette. So this worked out perfect that they could be here tonight. And they're going to be great representatives of not only Bryan High School, but our community. So we're excited to see what their next step. But we'll start off with Jessica Adams, who was our pitcher. She was named second team All-American by our
You're living my dream. I went to Bryan High and we didn't have a softball team. And I used to play football at Little League East just to be a part of it. And I watched you and your sister and the girls all year, and seriously, it was like I was right there with you.
And, her twin sister had actually a double award, and this is remarkable because it's the first time in our history of our program that we've had this honor, so we're very excited for her. So Jackie was named first team All-American catcher, and then also the National Catcher of the Year for the NFCA.
All right.
If it's okay with you guys, when I have the team take a picture with them before they leave, ask them to come up. So thank you guys again. Like I said, Dr. Whitbeck, thank you for making the trips with us, and everyone else, we wish you appreciate you got everything you provide for not only our sports, but for all athletics, and we are very blessed to be able to put on the uniform day in and day out.
Never seen the movie. Coaches, you need to get in there too. So proud of you. And Mr. Boobin, principal of Bryan High.
It's right across.
Girls, come up this way.
It's spread across the front here.
Come up this way. We'll make 2 rows. I may or may not have worked at Olin Mills.
Olin Mills. That should be way back. Olin Mills. Olin Mills? Baby. That's funny. Olin Mills.
Okay, at this time, we will go ahead and table the normal meeting and return back up to the public hearing on the 21-22 budget and 21 tax rate.
Let Matthew get that loaded up for us. Exciting stuff. That was a good run that they had. One game early, or one game too soon, but it's pretty awesome still.
Airplay's not working.
I'm clear on the roof.
You did clear out the room, didn't you? Don't be sensitive.
Some people just don't like these numbers. Thank you, Matthew. So tonight we start our public hearings, that time of year again to start to look forward to next year and set our budget and tax rate. So first thing we always, of course, want to try to do when we're talking about our budget and our funding and things is consider our district goals. Try to make sure that all of our expenditures and the things that we're working on always match up to what we say we're going to do, and try to make sure that comes out to the best of our ability. Yeah, there we go. And so if we look tonight, this is our proposed budget summary. We'll talk more about this as we go through the meeting tonight. But the proposed summary for our general fund will be revenue of about $155 million, expenditures of about $158.5 million for the general. We'll leave a deficit budget of $3.5 million to start with at the beginning of the year. Debt service will be balanced debt service with $26.2 million revenue and $26.2 million in expenditures, the interest and debt payments. And then the food service fund will be balanced as well as $9.7 million revenues and $9.7 million in expenditures. For total revenue of $191 million and expenditures of about $194.5 million with that $3.5 million deficit. And this just looks at our estimated general fund revenue for the 21-22 year. Some of the assumptions that we have to make, of course, going into the years, we looked at enrollment increasing by 100. Property value growth was about 2.6% this year. That's a little bit lower than our historical average, but still growth. And then our tax rate, as calculated with TEA, on that is 0.9518 per $100 value. That's for the general fund. That will raise our property taxes of about $89.7 million. State revenue based on that will be about $54.4 million. And then the TRS on behalf is 7.9. That's both in and out. That's the state pays that share, but we get a revenue and we have an offset on the expenditure side as well. And then some federal, that's mainly SHARP, Medicaid reimbursements, and then other examples such as rentals and different smaller items, investment earnings and things like that, for the total $155 million revenue. Some of the things that in the general fund expenditures include this year, of course, our salaries. There's a general rate increase this year. Increase in the district share of the employee health insurance premiums. We'll look at that a little bit later when we actually adopt the budget. Increase in premiums for property and casualty insurance. We've had some major claims this year, and the market for that was pretty unstable, so there were some increases. General inflation always seems to creep in, and then of course 10% reduction is what we made out some in campus and department budgets with some transfers. Of course, some of the recommendations to address the shortfall in the general fund. As always, we'll continue to pursue grants and programs to support the learning gap. Mainly that's the ESSER funding. We'll continue to utilize that. And we'll seek to maximize reimbursements for the COVID expenditures where available. One of those big items right now is our healthcare plan. Some of those larger expenses in that we can reimburse with the ESSER funding. Continue to monitor expenses and find efficiencies wherever we can to reduce that, and maximize any operating revenue that we can throughout the year. Factors that comprise our current revenue, of course, the state funding formula is a large one. That's based on our enrollment and attendance. Of course, our average daily attendance is very important. And then special populations, like CTE, for example, which was here, that's a weighted, we should give an additional weight on those, or special education is another one. Property values is determined by the appraisal district, and then of course the tax rate that goes along with that are the items that basically make up our. There we go. So our school property tax is made up of two criteria, two different segments: our maintenance and operation rate, which this year will be set at 95.18 per $100 of valuation, plus our INS, or our debt service rate, which is 0.275 per $100 valuation. The proposed total tax rate, 1.2268 per $100 valuation. Let's go to the next slide. Let's compare from prior years going forward. If we see on the chart there from 2016-17, we were at $1.35 in total rate, and then dropped down to $1.34 in 17-18, 18-19, and then continued to drop down $1.27 in 2019-20, and $1.23.25 last year, and then $1.22.68. So we've continued to decrease that as we have gone through, which is been very good, the things we've accomplished, we think. So we're very proud of that fact that we've been able to reduce that and still do the things that we've accomplished. And then the debt service is the other fund that will be adopted tonight with the approved principal and interest payments, about $26.2 million, which sets our tax rate basically for that. And then state revenue is $175,000, which is basically reimbursement for the homestead exemption that we're allowed. And then the property tax requirement on that. So that would be, we would set the rate at the amount to raise that amount of revenue to pay the property taxes. And then tonight, later in the meeting, we will recommend the adopting of the balanced food service budget, as we stated earlier, and adopt the general fund budget with the tax rate of 0.9518 for revenue, and then adopt the debt service with a 0.275 rate. And then there's a chart there that shows the difference between last year's rates. Like I said, the total 1.2325 to this year 1.2268, which is a little over a half-cent decrease from the prior year in total. And that will end this. If there's questions, or of course it's a public hearing.
I guess this is mostly for the public, or you can say my question for the regular meeting, I guess. I do have a question that might shed some light for the public as well. Let me go ahead and ask it, okay? Historically, it seems like it's pretty common that we've adopted a negative budget or the budget with a deficit. And I've understood over the years that part of that reason was that we had to make a lot of assumptions, and it seems smart to err on the side of conservative estimates with regard to enrollment and tax revenues and so on, just a lot of things that we couldn't really predict necessarily. And it also seems like historically we rarely ended up with a negative result at the end of the school year. Is that a fairly accurate assessment, or if you can just kind of address that a little bit? Because I think anybody looking at this for the first time might be a little concerned about a $3 million deficit.
Yes, sir, I'm happy to address that, and you're exactly right. There's always, like the estimates that we talked about, we'll make those on the conservative side. One example is just for property tax collection rate, we'll use 99% on that. Most years that comes in at 100% or higher, so that's just one example. Enrollment this year, and we'll probably talk about that a little later, but as we've gone through this process this year, for example, the enrollment is looking like it's picking up, but we want to be sure that that's actually going to be people in the seats and so forth. So our estimate for our average daily attendance, which is what our state funding is based on, is still at the level that we were at this summer. So we fully expect to come back on that item later in the fall with a budget amendment based on if those numbers actually come to be. But we would rather go that way than say, wow, we've got the enrollment is looking like it's way up, so let's project that up and be higher, and then have to come back later and say, well, but it didn't actually work out that way, so we're going to adjust it down. It just is always, to me, better to be able to come and give good news, so to speak, than to come and say we're not. So, and actually to address we have in the past few years adopted a negative budget. Last year, you probably don't remember, but I do, the $2.6 million negative is where we were projecting to be for this current fiscal year. And later in the evening, we'll have an amendment for this current year, and I think we're going to get pretty close. I believe it's within like 26,000 of coming back to break even. So, with those kind of adjustments and things. Now, this was an odd year because there's a lot of moving, with hail damage and insurance claims and, ESSER funding and Corona relief reimbursement. There's just a lot of things that went into it, but still, we're going to come out in that area where we get pretty close to break even. So yes, that's always our goal, is to get back to that. And we feel like we'll have, with the estimates we've made, we'll have a good chance for that this year. But we'll take that as we go and come back with amendments as we move through the year.
Thank you for that.
Yes, sir.
Can I ask a question about your chart on descending property taxes?
Okay. Yes, sir.
I'm not sure I entirely understand this correctly, but this is about the rate, is that correct?
Correct. This is the tax rate that is charged on the property.
But the actual amount that we're bringing in is increasing every year because of the increase in property value, is that correct?
Generally, that is true because the amount of the collections is based on a combination of the property value times the tax rate. Yes, sir. So it is quite possible that the rate goes down, but the values go up.
And then the amount coming from the state, which is on a per child by attendance, what's the percentage of the total budget that's coming from?
I could go back to that. It's in years past, it had been quite a bit higher, and there was a trend that the property values and property tax were making up a lot larger portion of that. House Bill 3 in 2019 actually reversed that trend, and so now it's going back to the other way. I want to say it was probably getting towards about 60% property values, 40%, lower 40% for the state. Now it's starting to turn around, yes, sir, and it's going back. I don't know what the exact percentages were this year, but it's changed about 2 or 3% in the last couple of years based on some of the changes that were made in House Bill 3 and Senate Bill 2 and 2.
State setting a reasonable rate, you have some cushion against any kind of property value fluctuation based on attendance being the primary driver of percentage revenue.
Yeah, I would say that's fair. I mean, it's just taking it, back more towards for the state to be putting in a larger part of that, yes.
So, based on that versus last year, the year before, do you feel like we are, I mean, you're covering the budget with the set for the budget, do you feel like accurate for the level of service that we're trying to provide?
I mean, that's a difficult question, but you're saying, do I think that the budget or the services we provide with the budget is valuable and meets the standard of what we can accomplish? Is that kind of?
Yeah, I mean, that may actually be a kind of question to the larger board. Are we, because I'm assuming, these are the numbers, this is the money, but are we hitting the academic and safety and other goals within this budget to the national?
Can you answer the question?
Yeah, so I'm hearing that.
Yeah. Okay, I'll address it. And Dr. Whitlock can certainly address it as well. But yes, I normally we get and approve what's coming from the administration, and that's, with Mr. Besall's, oversight over the budget. He's not necessarily, we've got a whole team of people here that's relying on that. And since I have been on the board, I can't say that we've ever denied any request strictly because of a monetary reason. And so if there's something out there that the curriculum team is looking for, and in fact we've gone, I think, above and beyond in some areas like the CTE, where we have, because on the other side we also have, we have what's commonly referred to as a rainy day fund. We have a cap on that, right? We don't sit there and just bank money. We have a cap, and then we reinvest that money back into the students when it gets when it hits a certain level. And so, again, I cannot think of any time where something wasn't brought to the board because of a fear that it would not be approved. And in fact, I think some programs that have come before the board get approved a lot quicker than they were expecting it or anticipating it to be. So I do think we're right there. And I think one area we've made a lot of improvement that we would still like to make improvement on is that of our teacher, faculty, and staff compensation. And one of the challenges there is it's so easy to drive down to Houston, where they've just simply maxed out the tax rate. All right, and so we're trying to balance and maintain an even keel tax rate, if not decreasing it here and there where we can. But oftentimes when we look at salary comparisons, what's really out of whack are those suburban Houston schools, and then you look at their tax rate, and they've maxed out their tax rate. And so that tends to be the difference.
I'll add in as a point of information too, when you look at a general budget for any district, the lion's share of the budget is salary. So we've gone from around 76% of the budget being salary to now 80, would you say 3-ish?
Yeah, I think we're 84%.
84%. So 84% of the pie is to take care of the near 3,000 people who serve the children. And that can be from everything from cafeteria to bus drivers to teachers to principals. And so I think that's always an important point because I don't know the general public realizes, but that's true in every district because the people are your greatest asset and they are your greatest expense. I will say that in terms of looking at goals with the board and other funds through bond, we have made safety a priority and many projects are going on, construction and such. But I would say into the academics, which is the main reason we exist, we've seen gains in academic performance. Now that was prior to COVID, so now we have to kind of push back, restart, and help with unfinished learning. But we also saw gains in college, career, military readiness. We sit at a 90 right now, and great gains each year in graduation rates. So when we look at the big rocks that we're looking for, but I would also say that it's important that our Bryan community remember that in Bryan ISD, what is unique are the amount of programs that we offer. And anytime you offer a smorgasbord of opportunities for kids, it always costs more. And we transport children from one program to another, depending on what they qualify for or what they wish to learn. So there's a lot of those moving parts that affect the budget, but those would be the highlights.
Thank you. I just wanted a little bit of context for what I was hearing. So I appreciate all the comments.
I think you're glad to have someone in the audience actually.
I think that's the first time we've done that. Someone's asked a question.
And if there's no additional questions, then we'll adjourn the public hearing and move back and reconvene the regular meeting. At this time, it's 6:37. And at this time, we'll go ahead and pick back up with citizens' comments. We did have a few come in. I will just remind the citizens within the comment time that you have 3 minutes, and I will do my best to time that up here. And then at the same time, the board will not respond, cannot respond at this point. So we're more than happy to hear what you have to say. And we'll start with Robert Rhodes.
Hello. I like the new place. This is the first time here, so start off with that. I'd like to say hello to the board members and staff here and anyone watching on TV at home. A lot of my background in the past, growing up here in the local area back in the 1970s, I was severely afflicted with asthma, highly asthmatic. And back in the 1970s, there wasn't a lot of good treatment for that. And so I had missed a lot of school and suffered tremendously with asthma back then. And so I had a very acute appreciation of what it's like to not be able to breathe. And so with the issue of COVID now, obviously it's respiratory disease. And so I'm very attuned to things that involve breathing, and that brings me here today. Two main items. The first thing is that obviously we've seen some of the large districts, Dallas, Austin, San Antonio, Houston, implement mask mandates, and I'd like to believe that that's the best policy from a public health standpoint, and I'd like to see at some point Bryan consider joining them in that. We strive to have the best sports teams and the best other programs that are comparable with anyone in the state, and I hate to think that we're shortchanging the children and the staff and the residents by not having the very best COVID protocol anywhere in the state of Texas. And so I think that needs to be considered, that when people are looking at, where they live and what their children are experiencing and what they may be experiencing working in various schools, they have to ask themselves at some point, am I as safe working in Bryan as I could be working in Dallas or Houston, where they're using masks and they're doing other things to help control COVID. So I think this may go on for a while. We could be looking at a multi-year situation here, and so I'd like to see Bryan at least be comparable with the other larger school districts in terms of policy. The other issue I'd like to bring up, I think I've been in touch with several of the teachers now, and some of them have had to quarantine for a number of days because they either tested positive or someone in their family got COVID and they quarantined. And I'd like to see some discussion of extending the number of personal days so that the teachers and staff that are in a situation where they have to quarantine, they don't necessarily burn through all their personal days for the semester. And so for a future agenda item, if you could consider that, I think the teachers would be appreciative and it would increase satisfaction.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next up we have Mr. Sherman, Matthew Sherman.
I'm going to follow in the same vein, but first, thank you. Both my children go to Bryan ISD, and they received great education. And I want to say thank you for how you handled COVID last year. I kept my kids home for the first 6 weeks because I didn't know what was going on and didn't quite trust it. I was very impressed with the level of safety precautions put in and the communication we received from the school. And that's why I'm a little bit disappointed. It seems that we're still doing a lot of cleaning and some stuff, but there's not a mask mandate and the communication has changed. And I understand that that's from a state top-down scenario. I know that is not the choice of the people that I'm talking to, but I felt extremely uncomfortable not having a voice and having that said and knowing that you guys have a voice and you're saying that in that direction towards our state. And that, number 5 on the goals is all about safety. And your slogan is children first, and this is pretty serious. I was considering pulling my kids out, but then my family got COVID. So now my kids have some level of immunity because they had the Delta variant recently. My extended family is vaccinated, but my wife got it, my uncle got it. We had to notify. We hadn't seen the grandparents in like a year. We're like, okay, we're all vaccinated, we'll get together. And turns out that, things have changed again, right? But we all came out fine. And so I almost got this sort of like, okay, we're good. And, there's the, oh my God, my kid might die. I'm like, fine. 3 or 4 days later, they are fine. And then within that week, I was notified through an ex-coworker that a guy that I worked on with 3 years on the team had died over the weekend. He'd come down with symptoms on Friday, self-quarantined at home. Roommate found dead on Monday that was away. I was 36 years old. So, you all know it's serious. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but I'm telling you the perspective I have as a parent because I felt like this was before and that it was important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is John Connors.
And thank you also for taking the comments. I'll follow up with the same theme. Removing masking measures made a lot of sense last spring when conditions were improving. Our medical system was under less stress, but things have changed dramatically in recent weeks with the Delta variant. And this is happening while RSV is also ravaging our communities and bringing more children to hospitals. Our healthcare system simply can't handle this. And in particular, many of the pediatric units that serve the region are at capacity, and we have nowhere for our children to go if they are sick and hospitalized. Given these new conditions, I'm masking my child as she begins kindergarten tomorrow at Johnson Elementary. I'm doing this for her safety, but also a deep concern for the physical, mental, and economic well-being of our community. Concerns that align again with those goals that you highlighted earlier. Sadly, I know our individual choices to wear a mask are not enough to protect my daughter and those around her, and all the current scientific research demonstrates that masking is most effective when done by all of those indoors. Without reducing the risk of this highly virulent disease, as contagious as the chickenpox or measles, we jeopardize not only the health and well-being of our children, the teachers and school staff, but also place stress on our local economy and healthcare system. When a child is sick and a parent stays home to care for them, or a parent gets sick from that child, this is a loss of wages for the household. It's a loss of labor for local businesses, many that are under stress. And in low-income households in particular, this burden of lost wages could jeopardize the ability of families to pay rent, utilities, or feed themselves. This places a double burden on those households, one that can have impacts that extend far beyond the period that a child is sick. Masks are a matter of education outcomes, and these are a matter of those district goals that you outlined earlier. I believe the concerns over the health of our children should be enough to motivate greater action in compliance with CDC guidance, but these decisions in our schools do have real impacts that extend far beyond the walls of the schools. Given the recent surge in the virus in our community has already experienced a higher than state average incidence of COVID in our schools, I asked the school committee to consider efforts to reinstate masking measures in more compliance with CDC guidance. Please take this step until the community is able to reduce transmission of the virus and our hospitals are less burdened. Without the changes, there will be children hospitalized, some unable to get the care they need. There will be children that suffer long COVID, recovering for months, if not longer. There will be children who bring COVID home to their parents, grandparents, and family members. Some of them will die, and some will lose jobs. All of these impacts will affect learning outcomes. To the community members, I thank you for acting out of love for our children by choosing to give your time and energy to our schools. You've accepted this tremendous responsibility to make sure our students have a safe environment to learn and grow and become productive members of our community. In accordance with the scientific experts of the world and guidance from the CDC, please do what must be done to continue to protect our children, community, and way of life. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you're on my island, I'm going to go ahead and, normally we have a cutoff at 10 minutes prior to, but since you sat through the economic open forum, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to speak this time.
Thank you for
It's like a soccer award.
Thank you so much for allowing us to speak tonight. I am also going to follow up on the mask and COVID theme, the last few speakers. So I'm here to advocate for a mask mandate for Bryan ISD staff and then specifically for children under 12. I'm a parent of an incoming kindergartner who will start school tomorrow at Johnson Elementary as well. And masks are their only protection against COVID-19 with no vaccination available for our children. We have a very low vaccination rate in Brazos County at only 42% and a high infection rate that has increased. Hospitalization cases by COVID have increased by 8% in the last 2 weeks in Brazos County. Children are at a lower rate of contracting and spreading COVID-19, but it's happening at a higher and higher rate with the Delta variant. And without action, more children in our community will be hospitalized, taxing our small healthcare system. I had an infant that was hospitalized for a cold in 2019, pre-COVID. She spent 6 days in the hospital for a cold, and I was told that she was under a month old, which is why we spent so long. But if she had had to receive any respiratory interventions, we would have had to be sent to Houston or Austin and outside of this community. So I know firsthand that our hospital system is not equipped to handle younger and younger patients. Additionally, children also need role models in the school system for appropriate behaviors, and they're receiving mixed messages from both their staff and peers on what is appropriate behavior in preventing the spread of COVID-19. It's hard for children as young as 4 to be making that decision to wear a mask all day when they don't have consistent role models who are also showing them that that is the CDC guidance and the best choice based on science to prevent the spread of COVID. So I hope that you choose to put a mask mandate for our staff and especially for children under 12 and choose the stance that's based on CDC guidance and science. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the comments. And next we will move down into the standing committee updates and superintendent's update.
Okay. Mr. LeBlanc, get the slides loaded here. A few things to go over, some connected to our speakers, and certainly our presentation. Our Dr. Ibarra, a little bit later, will be fully engaged in that topic. So a few things, starting off, just to give you an update of where we are today in our computer system, showing 16,274 students enrolled. We do have more in the queue that are not in there right now. This is an increase for us from where we ended our year at around 15,700. So we are seeing a great number of students coming back. Do want to mention that we always have no-shows. That's typical in every district. But we also know that there will maybe some parents that due to COVID are going to choose another option, perhaps homeschooling, something of that nature for the first few weeks or 6 weeks. I've heard that from a few. So we'll be able to give you an update on actual students by the end of the week. I wanted to share some good news as we talk about the different things that you have approved. And as you recall, we did the Seco loan, and that was at 2%, and it was over $6 million to be used in these particular areas, which of course the HVAC and ventilation reduction is an additional part to the health and safety of the environment in the schools. And so we were awarded a brand new special award as the 2021 Texas Energy Management Association Project of the Year. Paul Buckner back there. And you know, lighting is critical to learning. All of these things are connected, so we're excited to see the progress that we're making, and it's always nice to be given a pat on the back for that effort. Okay, and moving on, wanted to also, Mr. Besaw, he always has a lot of devil in the detail and all, but it's time to recognize he and his team for earning a 98 in the first financial aid. We're their trophies. I'm sorry, Mr. Besaw, we need Coach Linda to stay and present you one. But we are very proud of that, and our community counts on you as the board and our staff to be doing things right. And so this is a very high rating, and very proud of that. So thank you, Mr. Besaw, and to your team for their attention to detail. And by the way, that's all why we've had $187 million with the bond, a 12-cent tax decrease, and really watching every penny. And some good news that just happened. You can see here we just had Advise Texas A&M College Night, and there's just some pictures there of students who are getting help by various students at Texas A&M applying for college. And so this is always exciting. It affected all three of our comprehensive high schools, so very excited about that. And of course, our groundbreaking for intermediate number 3 that you all participated in. I know that was a great celebration for all of us, and particularly because we involved third graders who will be the first ones to step into that school in 2 years. So exciting things. And so as I turn to, let's see, I believe that Dr. Ibarra is coming up next, and she's going to be talking about T-class first and then return to learn. But as she does, I do want to mention a few things that I think will help. Her presentation is very thorough, but I think that it's important that we understand that the schools have been placed in a very difficult position. And I appreciate our community for recognizing that. I would call it politicizing. And so it is something that it should not matter in our schools. It does not matter to us who their parents vote for or what political party they're affiliated with, their religious beliefs, none of that matters. We just care about kids and we want to teach them all. So it's unfortunate that we've been put into that position and that it's weighing out in the courts. Now some of those urban cities that first put in mandates just today have announced that they're pulling back because everyone's in a very difficult position. I do want to remind you that it was on KBTX where they looked at the number of enrollment last year and what percentage of students actually had tested positive for COVID. And it showed that the state was up at 2.6 and Bryan ISD 4.8, College Station ISD 6 point something. But I think it's very, very critical that when we look at data, it has to be apples to apples. And this data is absolutely not. Because the state of Texas, many districts went online the first 6 weeks totally. They did not offer parents a face-to-face option. Our families wanted a face-to-face option and we provided that from August 20th on. Then additionally, many districts pushed the online even longer, and had very low face-to-face attendance, whereas we started at 55%, and as a reminder, we ended the year at 91% of our children face-to-face. So at 15,700 kids and that many face-to-face, then that's a very different data piece. So all in all, I'm proud of the work that we did last year. I think I would stand it up against anyone. And I just wanted to share that as a reminder as Dr. Ibarra comes forward. And she may want to switch her order. I don't know, that's up to her and to you, Mr. McCall. But thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Dr. Ibarra.
Do you want to do T-class, return to learn? What's our choice here? T-class should not take terribly long.
Yeah, let's get T-class out of the way
It's
first.
a quick one.
And then we can focus in on the return to learn.
This is honestly an awareness type of a presentation, so the board is aware of some of the opportunities that are out there from the Texas Education Agency and the district's interest in participating in a number of these. So T-class, because we needed another acronym for something else, right? This is the Texas COVID Learning Acceleration Supports that's put out by TEA. It's new and different than we've ever seen before. It's a new opportunity, but it's going to be reminiscent of several other opportunities that have been previously available through the TEA, through state funding. So essentially, this is a one-size-fits-all kind of a grant in that there are 15 different opportunities for funding, all bundled into one application. And the application is statewide. It's non-competitive, although there is priority funding based on certain data points. Those 15 opportunities are a wide range of opportunities that will help with COVID learning loss, acceleration, and responding to the needs of districts across the state. It's a stream from both federal and state funding. Essentially, it's a large bit of the ESSER funding that was set aside at the state level that TEA held back and is using to fund all of these programs, but at a much larger rate of participation than previously available through just state funding. Essentially, the state set aside $1.4 billion for T-class. The duration of the grant opportunity ranges based on each decision point, but in general, it starts right now. The application was available late July, and it's due Friday. So that's a quick turnaround, a pretty aggressive turnaround. And the funding will be available. They anticipate the Notice of Grant Awards, the NOGAs, to go out by December, and you can do pre-award costs for a number of the items. The funding goes through 2024, which mirrors the ESSER funding timelines. So in a nutshell, depending on which options you pick, you get different amounts of funding, and it's for a different duration of time based on the decision point. So what are all those decision points? So we formed many subcommittees because there are 10 major decision points, and within each one of those, there are other line item kind of opportunities. For example, one of those has 5 subsets of yes, no participation type options. And so it takes a committee of a wide group of stakeholders. There are 10 large committees that have come together to review opportunities and actually are going to continue to do so throughout this week. But they try to categorize them into various groups. So one's on strategic planning, that's over on the left, and instructional materials type of opportunities, teacher pipeline opportunities, more time, not that you get more time, but how do you use your time, and then innovative school models. So we kind of look from left to right. Strategic planning is really looking at partnering up to 5 schools with a technical assistance provider to look at the effective schools framework and to really create a robust improvement and acceleration plan that's responsive to the needs of their students based on COVID and learning loss. So what's nice about that is it works in partnership with the campus administration. So we can fund up to 5 schools in that situation. Under instructional materials, there are many subcommittees that go with this one and sub-bullets that go with it. But in a nutshell, it's instructional materials to supplement, but in some cases, they want you to supplant your instructional materials you already have in place and try theirs out. One thing that would be very nice, and we're looking at doing, is it would give us the opportunity to basically put in an entire summer school curriculum that's pre-ready, that's grade level specific and appropriate for acceleration. So some good activities there. Yes, ma'am.
For all grade levels?
Up through grade 8.
Okay.
Up through grade 8. So yes and no.
Yes and
Yes
no.
and no. Because there are other items in here like College Bridge, which helps with the high school side of it. How can we support our teachers who are teaching those college bridge courses that function as basically a TSIA equivalent for that particular subject? And so there's funding for that, which we're excited about. There's funding for decoding and phonics type texts for the smaller children, pre-K through first, where every kid can go home with 53 little books for a little book library at their home that work on phonics. Really excited about that. And a number of other things that could also be utilized in that particular category. Teacher pipelines, super excited. And what's nice, we're already doing some of this. For example, our Aggie Term program, where we have residents who work with us for a full year, and they get paid a stipend through the grant opportunity in partnership with Texas A&M University. It originated out of a TEA grant, a Grow Your Own grant that we worked on in conjunction with Texas A&M. Well, now TEA is opening it up even larger than that. Our current Aggie Term grant is through the U.S. Department of Education, which makes all of this allowable for a wider net of participation for Aggie Term, and also allows us to expand it out to other universities, like Sam Houston State University, who also has a year-long residency program and is 8 in our district for the coming year. We would be able to give each of those residents a $20,000 stipend for that year. So pretty exciting opportunities to incentivize becoming a teacher, and especially in Bryan ISD. So excited about that. That funding continues for 3 years, so this year and 2 more years thereafter. It also gives us some funding to help our paraprofessionals, very limited in scope, 6 total people, para and teachers, or para and degreed, that could become a certified teacher at the end of a 2-year period, either through getting the credential because they already hold a degree, we can pay for it and give them a stipend, or to help them obtain their college degree and certification. So a lot of good opportunity there to grow within the district and help our own staff become certified teachers. We have a number of those that are seeking those opportunities. So the pipeline particular section of the T-Class grant is very exciting. Under more time, it looks at tutoring supports. Our TEA has worked with a number of people to develop a vetted tutor corps that they're developing materials for, and in fact partnership with outside entities. That was released on Friday. Remember, the application is due this Friday, so we're excited to look over those materials before we move forward with that opportunity. So that's tomorrow, but that's something we might also consider to give our students some additional support and accelerated instruction in response to COVID, and also in response to House Bill 4545, which has a lot of stipulations on how we provide tutoring, including a ratio of 1 to 3. So a lot of things that we're looking at that this could be supportive of that. It also gives additional funding for you to take a look at your calendar again. How could you maximize your instructional days so that you would qualify for the additional days school year? That was under the 86th legislature, which allowed for 30 days of additional half-day funding if certain conditions were met. So this helps you form a task force and fund all of the work that task force would need in order to be able to make that opportunity available in Bryan ISD. So something we would look at and consider and then bring to the board for consideration. And then finally there you see 2 opportunities, P-TECH and a new schools model. P-TECH is very similar to what we're doing through C-TECH and also Bryan Collegiate High School. We feel like we have that opportunity for our students already. New school models, possibly. There's a whole strand there for blended learning. That is the focus at grades 5 through 12. How do we do quality blended learning experiences for students where you maximize instructional time, resources, and also provide personalization through the use and leveraging of technology in the classroom? This would help principals do that. So again, something we're looking at. And something that we want to see if our campus administrators are interested in participating in. So a great deal of opportunity, a very short time to make those commitments that are 3 years and projected out for 3 years. But hopefully we will have everything on track, and we will have everything on track rather by Friday. So any questions on T-Class?
You know, Barbara, knowing you already have a lot of these things in your mind exactly how you're going to write it out, because we're already doing a lot of them.
Yes, ma'am.
Tomorrow just happens to be kind of a busy day.
It's just a smidge.
It just surprises me.
This is the afternoon of tomorrow, not the morning.
That the state would do this at
It
the time.
surprises you, Ruthie?
Sorry.
That's so cute.
You know, when school is starting with all the crazy things that are going on. But that leads me back to what I said, knowing you, remembering your classroom is so organized that,
A little type A, yes.
you know, I have all the faith in the world with you and your team getting this done because we really are doing a whole lot of these things. And so you're just going to be cutting and pasting many of them. You know, I just would hope and pray that the money is actually as it seems. Because it's a grant, maybe the state can't take away what the federal funds funneled through them before they get to us.
I think a lot of decisions in terms of who gets what and how much will depend greatly on how many districts out there apply for each decision point, and then giving those priority points based on whatever that particular decision point, whatever the main idea was for that, if it was to serve low income or to serve gifted and talented or to serve, you know, whatever it was, the priorities vary from decision point to decision point, and then the funding's allocated, and once they hit to a certain moment, well, then there's not funding for anyone after that particular line. So it's not competitive, but it is prioritized, and so it'll be interesting to see. They do expect a quick turnaround in terms of response to our application, and that we should get preliminary awards as early as September, and then the notice of grant award by December. So that's at least expedited as well.
This is your best environment. I mean, this is where you thrive under pressure like this, so go for it.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Barr, so my
Yes.
question was, as we've been working with TASB and at the legislative level, trying to get them to fund the online school option,
Yes, ma'am.
and to allow us to get funding for kids that end up having to learn online because of that. So under the innovative school models, when they're talking about technology,
You would hope it would be there, wouldn't you?
I was just hoping.
It is
Sometimes I
not.
just talk to myself.
It is
When
not,
you said
but
blended learning.
blended.
It
It's
wasn't.
not. So
No,
it is
blended,
not
not
gonna
virtual,
help.
so on campus with technology. But in the next presentation, I do have some information regarding that.
Well, then I'll just wait.
I guess the only question that I have, and this is really more of not really serious, but is there any money for committees, considering how many committees that we already have?
Committee fatigue, yes.
And then committees on top of committees, and we
Yes.
need to,
Well, they're going to allow you to work with a technical assistance provider who will tell you which committees you still need. So while there's not a funding for committees, there's a committee manager.
to tell you what committees.
Yes, sir, to tell you how many more committees you need and how often they should meet.
It's like a
Yes.
Baptist church with a committee
So
on committees.
We may need to upgrade the candy that's in here. When they walk
I
through
think that would
there.
be wise.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, and moving on into your next item.
Yes, and if I could have the whole team come on down. It's Price is Right stuff. Yes.
Yay, team.
Come on down. Okay, so as with all things over the past pandemic, however long you want to denote how long it's been going on, because it's continuing, we work as a team. And that's clear from the work of Dr. Whitbeck with all of her community partnerships, but also true of what she expects of each of us. And so we're here this evening as Return to Learn 2.0, 3.0, whatever version we're on at this point, is updated and communicated to you and to our constituents. So, for example, here, this is the new Return to Learn plan. It is revised based on the new guidance from Texas Education Agency. And so it is online. Mr. LeBlanc already has it posted for us. Please note that there is a date stamp on this. In fact, it's on the top there, but it's also on the bottom of each page, last updated. Last year, we updated it pretty much weekly, if not more frequently than that, based on developing conditions. And that will certainly be true this year. While the plan is online, the plan is not to sit there and be it for the year. It is to be responsive throughout the year, to listen to the constituents, listen to the parents, the kids, the teachers, and to be responsive of local health conditions, and we'll continue to do that. So we're open with, I think what was part of the conversation this evening from our guests. And as you all know, the governor's order is in place and has been upheld recently by the Texas Supreme Court that we cannot, as a government building and extension thereof, basically mandate masks. However, I think we would all say we strongly encourage the use of masks, especially in light of local health conditions, and as our parents mentioned moments ago, Delta variants and other concerns with RSV in the community. Do what we can to protect ourselves and protect others from contagions if we are at all able to do so. So it is in effect for all Bryan ISD buildings that it is optional, but we would encourage and ask that our parents and teachers partner with us in prevention of the spread. Along with that, there are some unique differences with transportation services. Ms. Johnson.
So yes, so this year, we find that the federal mask mandate will still be in place, so. Oh, sorry, coming up to the mic. So we will be following the federal mask mandate on our buses. So as kids get on, they will be given a mask if they don't have one already. We're also continuing these sanitation stations on the bus. So as they come on, they can go ahead and sanitize their hands. We're going to encourage the social distancing on the buses as we can. And then we'll also be sanitizing between routes. So you may remember last year after the morning route, we'd come through, spray everything down. We'll continue to do that. And it's good practice, whether it's fighting COVID or flu or whatever it happens to be. But one of the exciting things this year also is our Here Comes the Bus app. So you remember we had one that was really successful, and then the company decided that they were not going to be in business anymore with us. So we found a new replacement. So far we've had 1,000 parents sign up, thanks to our parent nights, which we've been going to and talking about the app and getting parents signed up. So if you have any parents that are going to have kids riding the bus, please encourage them to sign up. And that's it for busing. Any questions? All right.
Another common question that we're receiving at this time is, will the schools actually provide the COVID vaccines? And at this time, we will not provide. We know that they are readily available throughout our community. We know that you can log onto the district community health website to see it. We know that there are many entities throughout the community, such as Baylor Scott & White, CVS, HEB, Kroger, Walmart, Walgreens, et cetera, are readily available. However, one thing that we are reviewing, and it has been in some discussion, is to possibly emulate what we offered last year. I'm not sure where the slide went, but you may recall back in May, Baylor Scott & White reached out to Bryan ISD and College Station ISD, and we very willingly partnered with them. We were the host, they were the providers, they came with their nursing staff, et cetera, and we actually provided, 700 vaccines, I believe, to our staff members at that time. So again, we haven't figured out the plan, but we do know that the health authorities are asking school districts to consider being host sites, so we're looking at that as we speak. We just don't have anything in stone at this time. Here we go. So there we go. I think we covered everything on that. Again, vaccines, and as our parents all stated, we know that they're not available for children under age 12, so certainly something that we keep at the forefront of our mind. Also, what PPE will be available in schools? We are replicating as much as possible everything that we did last year because we do know that we had proven results from that. We're going to maintain the sanitation stations at our campuses. We've been working with our campus principals to make sure they have enough of this supply. We've given them hand sanitizer, disinfectant wipes, and spray, et cetera. We don't expect the teachers to do all of that cleaning. A lot of them wanted it just as another layer of cleaning. Our custodians will remain that very strict protocol that we used last year, where they come into the classrooms, clean every day, and we do what we call thorough or deep cleaning on Wednesdays and Fridays. They purchase the electrostatic backpacks, and they're spraying everything down. If we know of a COVID positive case, if a parent notifies us, then we go in and we clean in that area, not just campuses, in all of our departments and facilities. And then sneeze guard barriers, those were wildly popular. Some school districts chose not to do those. We decided that we would keep them in place. So you can see in the photo up there, they're the little barriers that we put on the desk, and our campus principals have received, they had some left over from last year. We replenished them, and we even have more on order, just anticipating that we may get more requests for that. Mask, we've covered that. Again, it is strongly encouraged. It is required on our bus. And we know that some students may get to school and they've lost it between the bus and then, going inside the building. So should they get to the school and they choose to wear a mask, we will have, we have disposables, we have the reusables, we'll have a plentiful amount of them available should they ask for them. And then one other measure that we've taken is looking at the number of visitors coming into the schools. I know that many parents, especially in elementary, would like to walk their kids to class or join them for lunch, et cetera. So until further notice, we're asking that the families no more than 2 at a time come in. Just, again, trying to limit the number of people so that we can enforce as much as possible the social distancing. So lots of things in place as safety remains the #1 priority for our students and our staff.
Ms. Carabine, I'm going to interject just a moment on the visitor. That was an additional precaution we put in place last week. So tomorrow being the first day of school, especially for those parents of kindergarten, pre-K, we know that sometimes mom and dad do come on that first day. There could be a 2-year-old in their arms. We are not going to be visitor police, but we know that after that, though, the word keeps getting out when it comes to come to visit for lunch or walking your child in, then we want to adhere to the max of 2. So just to mention that, since tomorrow is the first day.
Good point.
Very important to families.
Okay, virtual school. Will there be a virtual school option? So prior to the pandemic, virtual school, in terms of a full-time virtual school, is not permitted under Texas Education Code. It's actually prohibited. And so there's not statute in place to do so. During the pandemic, the governor had special orders and was able to give special provisions for us to open virtual school while serving during the pandemic. Well, that has expired. And unfortunately, the last legislative session ended without a closure to this topic. There was great support for virtual schools during that last legislative session, so much so that TEA even offered up an opportunity for districts to apply for the Virtual School Accelerator Program, where they would partner with you and help you make sure you were ready to open your virtual school in August. Bryan ISD was one of a few that were accepted by the state to open and to be partners with a virtual school accelerated program. When the House, or when the Senate and the House lost quorum, the bill died and no action was taken. So unfortunately, statute has not changed and the special provisions are not in place, which allows a district to open a virtual school at this time. That being said, we're still looking at it. We're still looking at what could we do should the special session come to fruition and the legislation is updated, which it is on the agenda to be reviewed. We want to make sure we are positioned to be able to extend that opportunity. Of note, that in both the legislative sessions that we've looked at so far, the one that concluded with the bill not having a final vote, and with the ones that are being looked at right now for special session, it gives a stipulation that teachers cannot be asked to do both. And so this would be an entirely separate teaching workforce from our current teaching workforce. They basically cannot be expected and asked to have a foot in both worlds. And understandably, that was very challenging. It was necessary at the time, but I would say it was challenging for both students and for parents and for teachers. So you have to basically hire virtual specific teachers. So we have a posting right now on our website for full-time virtual teacher and also part-time virtual teacher. I think we might get to take advantage of some teachers who maybe are staying home with children or who have retired or who are living in the area but want to work from home. Whatever the case may be with their circumstance, we would like them to consider teaching at a virtual school if we're able to open it. So we are working on that right now, and we had a lot of it already drafted. Now, interestingly, at the time when the surveys went out to all families last spring, the interest was in grades 5 through 12. But at this time, we recognize that the vaccine is only available for 12 and over. And so we're seeing more interest now from a different grade range than was previously looked at. So I would say that we're looking at all options at this point. It would be extremely difficult to move midway through the semester for high school students because of rank in class and GPA and all of your courses. But doesn't mean we're not looking at how could we make it work. So we're anxiously waiting to see what happens with the special session, and we are going to go ahead and proceed with the applicant pool, proceed with screening the applicant pool, and be ready should we get that permission to proceed. Any
Dr.
questions?
Ybarra,
Yes.
I want to ask you, you gave us a whole scenario of the grant that you're going to be working on that's due Friday.
Yes, ma'am.
And so we all have an idea. It's hard for me because I'm not a grant writer to wrap my head around that and all the manpower and the hours that you're going to have to put into that. Okay, compare that to all the manpower and hours that we as a district and you put into applying for the virtual school.
Yes.
That died on the vine in the legislature. So how much work do you think went into that?
That we had a task force that met weekly for a couple of months, and then developed course catalogs, developed student expectations, parent attestations, all of that. It was quite extensive. That was just to be prepared, not necessarily because TEA was. Well, they were asking us what we thought we were going to do. We didn't have to commit to it. The grant application in that sense was relatively reasonable, but you can't not go through that process if you're really going to open one in August. So we were already going down that road to make sure we were ready. I will say, thankfully, with T-Class, they've reduced a number of the narrative type aspects of this grant application because they're not making it competitive. They're not scoring it other than on data points. And so they have made it much more streamlined, extensive, but still streamlined.
Well, what I'm getting at here is I would love for our community to really understand we were ready.
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, and chomping at the bits to have a virtual school, a virtual academy.
Yes.
Maybe even for other districts to send students to, or to have students from other districts, because there were some other districts around here that wasn't going to be one of the things that they were going to do.
And if I may, Mrs. Waller, to your point right there, one of the exciting things about the legislation that was being drafted at the time was it would allow the home district to keep the student enrolled in the home district, receive the ADA, and there would just be a service fee for the providing district, just like with CTEC. I mean, it was a partnership truly where we're here to support each other, and it was mutually beneficial.
So we were ready, literally ready.
Yes, ma'am.
With that, on that stack of bills that were to be looked at in the legislature, planning for it. All we needed was the go, and then the state to fund. We had to hire teachers because you couldn't do that on your own. And it's still sitting there.
Yes, ma'am.
So I just want the community, this was something that, when I heard that happened, it was late at night, and I think I contacted Ms. Carabine, and I said, is this really what I think it is? And she said, if so, we're going to lose this school. So I want the community to know we were ready and able, and we will be in the future if it's something that we deem necessary. And so when we were talking, some of the citizens were talking about, do we think we're getting a bang for our buck? Here, is the taxpayer money being spent for things that are actually needed? Yes, it is. And all of us up here, I bet between us, we have 17 kids that have gone through Bryan ISD, or literally are in Bryan ISD. My kids went to Johnson. And so we all have a vested interest in this.
Yes.
But thank you for letting me get that out of my system.
Thank you, Mrs. Waller.
And you can tell me if you're going to address this
Okay.
farther on. So with Schoolology, hypothetically, and not to hex any of us or give bad juju, if something happens and we have an exposure at the school and we end up with 10% of a grade level having to quarantine for 10 days, how are we going to provide them education if we, by law, are prohibited from doing online school and by law can't have a teacher doing in classroom and online because our laws are not made by educators?
You know, Mrs. Dwayne, you give the best questions. What I will say is that any student who is COVID positive or who chooses to self-quarantine, and Dr. Merrill will be talking about this here in just a moment as well, and it is not at school, will be considered absent. As with any absent, the students can make up the work for when they are absent. Thankfully, because we have Schoology and we have a learning management system and we have technology, thanks to the board, for grades 5 through 12, and even enough technology for an elementary student to check one out if they need to be home, they can participate via Schoology in terms of accessing materials. What we will not be able to ask our teachers to do is to have required office hours and to provide virtual instruction through Schoology. That does not mean that there's not resources in Schoology that would be helpful to the child the teacher posts. It simply means they're not a virtual teacher and an on-campus teacher simultaneously. But a student would be absent and they would have the same number of days to make up any of the work, at least the same number of days to make up any of the work that they missed. With one caveat, tests will be taken on campus. That is new and different this year, and certainly something that needs to be addressed.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so virtual school is a standby, and at our next update, I hope to give you more information about virtual schools. So what are the protocols? Much of this is posted on the website as well as Texas Education Agency. This does come from them. These are the protocols given by the state agency to all districts across the state of Texas. But essentially, if a student or a staff member is positive for COVID, they must meet those 3 things before they can return to work or school. No fever for 24 hours, improvement of your symptoms, and at least 10 days have passed since your symptoms have started. I will say there, you'll note the parents, we're requesting parents to once again email their campus if their child is positive so that we can get that into our system. We do have required reporting to TEA on positive cases, but also so that we can accurately track the absences and make sure we have enough support in place for the student. It may be that they reach out to their teachers and get additional work outside of Schoology as well. What are we reading this week, right? So those emails are the same as last year, and they're also in the Return to Learn plan and then noted there. So what is different is for a UIL student. If you're a UIL student and you are positive, they do require a medical release from a doctor. It does not have to be a medical test, but you must have a doctor's permission to return to activity. So that is different for UIL. That is an additional requirement that must be met for participation. So what if you're suspected of having COVID? Last year, this was known as symptoms of COVID. This year, it's suspected of as having COVID. In this situation, the same is true. Those 3 conditions must be met with one caveat. If you come back with a different diagnosis from a doctor, you can return to school. If your doctor says, no, you had bronchitis, no, you had a sinus infection, no, you don't have any of those things, you may come back to school. You do not have to show a negative test, simply the doctor's verification that you're cleared to return to school. And then, of course, close contact. With close contact, the TEA has changed this requirement, possibly in conjunction with the understanding that without masks, contact tracing may be challenging, but not impossible, and we can certainly do it. But more importantly, that the local health department is the one conducting the contact tracing at this point. But it says that students may quarantine. They are not required to quarantine, but they may quarantine if they believe they were in close contact with an individual who was positive. So that is the biggest change for this year. The health department will be taking over contact tracing, and that individuals have choice in whether or not they quarantine due to close contact. Any questions before I click on to Dr. Merrill? All right.
These are TEA rules. We didn't make these.
Correct. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
So I can disagree with it, but
yes, ma'am.
Just to hear myself disagree with it.
Well, and so that note about individuals who are vaccinated,
Yes, ma'am.
when it says they are not considered a close contact, does that mean if they're vaccinated and they come into close contact with someone, or if some,
Essentially, what TEA is trying to communicate there is exactly how you described it. If Dr. Merrill is positive and I'm vaccinated and we were together for longer than 15 minutes without masks, I'm still not considered a close contact according to TEA.
Okay, got it.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And I'll jump in here on one of the prior slides on the alternate diagnosis. I know my wife works at the COVID clinic. She's a practitioner at the COVID clinic for St. Joseph's, and that was one of the most frustrating things they dealt with last year. Was they had to give kids and adults, test after test after test. It was bronchitis. I mean, they knew it was bronchitis. They constantly had bronchitis, but they constantly had to keep them tested and keep them quarantined. Yeah, so that I know will make a lot of the healthcare relieved. That particular rule is in there.
And this came in partnership with Dr. Whitbeck's work with Dr. Sullivan and the Brazos County Health District and local agencies that they also looked over these protocols and very much agreed with that stipulation. All right, Dr. Merrill.
All right, we'll go back. It's always fun to have people that went to school thinking they know exactly what needs to be done in school, and that's what we've got going on. So there's a little bit of sarcasm in that statement as well as a little frustration. And so as a response to the commissioner and some of what he handed down, we dealt with a couple of things. And one of them was we wanted to make sure that for the parents, they had transparent communication that was timely and accurate. And because the health department's taking over some of those responsibilities, we still felt a burden, to be completely honest with you, to make sure that we communicated. I have my wife and my daughter both work at Johnson. She was the pre-K teacher, so I don't know if y'all were in pre-K or not. If not, you missed her. She's amazing. But I have she is. I can't take credit for it. She got it all from my wife.
Matthew, did you get that?
Yeah, take that on record, for sure. But we all have a vested interest. I have 3 kids in the district, so we all want accurate communication. We want to know if there was a close contact, and we want to be able to communicate that as accurately as possible without breaking HIPAA. And so how could we do that? We've spent the better part of hours talking about it with principals with not only technology, but then those vendors that supply us with the technology to make sure that we can do what we need to do in a timely fashion, not only for the parents to make decisions, but also for the educators, for them to be able to still do their job and not get bogged down so much in this that they can't do anything else but just become COVID central. And so part of that process was what's the best means of communication? Is it a phone call? Is it a text message? Is it an email? We felt like that was an email. We received that from our parents and our principals that was the best way to communicate. Phone calls get ignored to some degree. And so we sought that process. And so we honestly took on some of the responsibility here at administration. We're going to extract the data if there's a positive case. We're going to filter through that so that they don't get multiple emails giving them false information on, is this accurate? How many classrooms? Is it 1 kid, 3 kids? We don't know. And what can we communicate? And so on top of the dashboard that we had last year, which we'll go to in a minute, this will be communicated through email. And like I said, we spent today talking about it. We spent Friday talking it. We've spent multiple days kind of hashing through this. And Julie and her department have even kind of leveraged whatever they could, bent the arms of technology, our vendors, to make sure that we can get this done. So there's some modifications coming, but this will be communicated. So I'm very proud of this, to be completely honest with you. I don't think every district is making this stance. This is something that's above and beyond really than what we were asked to do. So if you'll go to the next slide, you'll see the COVID, or the dashboard. This is what you saw last year. This is when we pulled this information, this was actual live data. And so you'll see there kind of what we're dealing with. 3,100 total staff, 1,600 total students, 9 positive cases for the staff, and clearly we don't know any of the students at this point. So we'll receive that information. Again, this is live. It's always available. We talked a little bit about absences, and it's going to be a new dawn, new era. And so we really have spent quite a bit of time talking to the assistant principals, the registrars, and the teachers just on how we go about this. So we've talked about students, employees who are out due to positive COVID cases are considered absent. Clearly that's the case. That no longer is in existence where they have days and it doesn't count against them. So students, employees who elect to self-quarantine due to potential close contacts are considered absent. Absences will be considered excused. They will be obviously not forgiven, but they're not considered unexcused. All absences for employees will be treated as leaves days per policy. And again, that's what one of our patrons talked about. We understand it. Unfortunately, it is what we have to do. And so it will be counted against them. If your child cannot attend school the first day due to illness, we please would ask if anyone's watching to let the campus know. And that goes with no-shows. We have that every year. Students that transfer, students that maybe don't come back, students that decide to be homeschooled. So we're trying to figure out exactly what category those students fall into. Now, if they're sick, we just need to know so that we can accurately report that and we know how to respond. And so if you would let us know, we would greatly, greatly appreciate it. What do we do about makeup work? So kids have been sick all through, the time of school, right? How do we handle that? And so to some degree, we're going to handle it like we used to prior to COVID. If a student's absent, we're going to make sure they get the necessary time to make up their work. It is an excused absence, so it's not counted against them. They do have that working in their favor. And we do have technology. So the blended learning that Dr. Barr talked about earlier, we still have that. So we still want to be able to utilize that where we can. And Schoology will still function as a way of being able to distribute that information, just like Google would or any other platform would be able to communicate the assignments, the work, all those types of things. But what we found is that, that work, if it's done at home, we're not exactly confident who's doing that work. And so in cases where there's exams, where those grades are more heavily weighted, we want to make sure that we lay eyes on the kid and we have an opportunity for it to be a level playing field. What we don't want is an unlevel playing field where I stay home and I have an older sibling, or I have the help of Google, or I have the help of whatever, and my grade is all of a sudden inflated next to my partner's who has shown up every day. Now, that being said, we don't ever want a kid to come to school that's sick, and we're ready and willing to take advantage of Saturdays if need be, and night if we need to. We will make sure that staff is available whenever is needed to be able to accommodate those students if they have this going on. We wanted to come back and just talk about our secondary campuses and what the schedule looks like. I'm really proud of this. It's definitely thinking outside the box. We listened all the time. And we took so much feedback and so much dialogue about what this looked like. And I'm excited for many reasons. Number one, it kind of slows the day down in the middle of the week. It does do many of the things we wanted to do with passing periods, but it allows our teachers just an opportunity to change the way that we instruct and the way that we deliver the instruction. And it allows us to just have various ways of preparation and being intentional about our lesson design. And they were very excited. The principals were very excited, and I think it's going to pay huge dividends in the long run.
Dr. Merrill, did you come up with a name for this schedule yet?
I think you sat in a meeting where we named them. It's a full house, if I remember correctly. If anybody's ever played cards, it was 3 and 2. So
I just wasn't really sure.
Yeah. I was a little uncomfortable, maybe a little embarrassed when I said full house, and we had a straight, had all kinds of stuff. I couldn't think of another name. We just needed some name to be able to term it. Modified block, I think, is what we landed on, or something like that.
No, I think it was full house.
I think it was full house. Okay, you are the board member, so I will definitely defer to you for sure. I think that's all for my slides.
I know there was one thing that came up.
Sure.
With the schedule, and it ended up being a non-issue, but because the student that it was impacted chose not to do the blend route. Mm-hmm. But they were having some trouble getting the blend schedule.
It can be complicated. There are outside professors, and my son is in dual credit at Bryan High. And so, you're working with an outside entity, and coordinating that is very difficult for sure. So I'm thankful. Plus IB and AP, and as someone already mentioned, I've never been a part of a district. I've been a part of two. One that was incredibly large, second largest in the state of Texas, and then one that was about half the size of Bryan. I've never seen a district that offers as many programs as this one for their students. And I mean that in a positive way. For example, my senior is in dual credit IB, he can weld, and he's an auto body. Like, that's incredible. Like, that and he's an art, and he had the opportunity to take all those classes.
Is he still in football?
He's still in football too.
So
He's in football too. I love that one out. He does play football too. Yeah, he does.
So.
Yeah. We're going to have a good team this year as well.
I have a question and a comment. Back before you were born, we had trimesters here.
We did.
I don't know if you knew that. Okay.
I was here at Bryan High. I still taught in the trimester. Yes, ma'am.
And you know it very well what I'm talking about. And one of the things that I heard comments were made is that about, we've got more time.
We do.
And we can slow things down. And my reaction to that was, no, you don't really. I mean, it's great that you have continuous time, but the time except for maybe that little bit of passing period, you really, yes, you gain a little time, I think.
You do.
But not like, oh, I've got twice as much time, so I can
You
slow
don't.
things down. You've got to cover really pretty much twice as much
You do.
as you would in one.
You do, and that's the beauty of this, is that's one of the downfalls of a true block schedule, is it can be seep into your mind like, oh, I've got time, whereas really that one day is 2 days, so
Right.
it can get away from you pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I think with this is, you have one day, it creates that urgency, because you turn around and then you know that the next one's coming. But I agree, that is one of the downfalls of block scheduling.
We just have to make sure
We
everybody
do.
realizes that they can get, have that mentality.
I agree.
The question is about communication, and since y'all already spent hours and hours on it, you won't mind spending a little bit more with a board member, I hope. But
Absolutely.
you mentioned emails, and I don't disagree with that at all. I think perhaps seeking an acknowledgement from the person that they received it hopefully wouldn't be too much trouble to see if maybe they'll at least, you'll know that they got it if they acknowledge receipt. In other words, they read it. The other part of that is if they don't, I know this is more trouble, but everybody's got cell phones now. So, and they may not be looking at their email. So did y'all consider, I realize it's technically a little more difficult unless you've got your computer set up to send text, but did y'all consider sending text as the backup?
Yeah, we did. We looked into all of those options. Do you want to have?
And Julie, you probably can help me with this one too.
Everybody.
It's a team approach. Okay, so to your first question about how do we know if they received the email? So one of the things I think Ms. Johnson would tell you is we're quite proud of the number of email addresses we currently have for parents. That has improved exponentially over the pandemic, where we have active and reliable email addresses. But what the system does for us is it tells us that there's an undeliverable, and then we have campus staff follow up with that parent. Hey, this got bounced back to us, just like when a mail item or envelope gets returned to you. This got bounced back to us. Where are you at now? And we can update that address. So that process has been in place. It's very critical to transportation to have a quality email address. What else would you say to that?
Well, I would add that a few years ago, during our transportation issues, the director, Warren Lamphere, had said, can we just switch to email? So that's when we kind of made that concerted effort to check emails. And I wouldn't do it, because I was like, no, we're sending a letter, because I know that hopefully that will get there. We did see issues with the old-fashioned letter as well. But we did that for a couple of years before we would switch to the digital email, because we had to get that. We had to get it where every parent had an email address. So now we go and we chase them. So I'm very proud, like this summer, we were down to 200 families that didn't have email addresses. Wow. And we provide directions on how to get an email address. Many of them just use their cell phones to do their emails. And so it's right there on their phones. Sure. And it's like we were talking to an elementary the other day that just had 20 in their entire school that they were going to be chasing down this year. And some of those were new parents. So we've really tried to push for that, and we've seemed to get to be more receptive to the email, just because you can put so much content in it. We've been attending the parent nights as a team with technology, but also for the grades.bryanisd.org and transportation. And while we're there, we teach them how to access their hack account, check their email addresses, all those kinds of things. So we're bringing them in and making sure that we're doing a really good concerted effort to get them engaged through email. So with the text messages and phone calls, we find that many parents really don't like those.
Phone calls, nobody
wants those, right? As far as the text messages, the current system, and this is when they mentioned us contacting the vendor, if I send it via text message, you might get it 3 times when you were exposed by one child. It's just a failure of the system that it can't clear those duplicates, and we're worried that will actually alarm parents, thinking they're getting all these massive exposures. Now, we're still working with the company, and they understand the concern, and it's only been about a week we've been working on this problem. So I think it will actually progress and get better. And I don't know, so that's kind of why we leaned on the email option. you'll get that one
I
email.
was basing this all on communicating with my wife.
Yeah.
If I send her an email, she'll see it maybe in a week, and a text, she'll see it the second. So,
Right.
So
I
probably
get it.
shouldn't be basing everything on what I do with my wife. But
Absolutely.
I would say one other thing before Matthew steps up is their phones change constantly. People's phones do, emails don't. So I can tell you that as we start to look through phones and try to find numbers, they can change vendors, all kinds of things. And so, 200, they're probably 200, probably changed today, numbers just, and we're trying to run those down to be able to access them. So that would be the other reason. And we just didn't want, again, 3 or 4 emails or 3 or 4 calls or texts coming through, because then it's one kid, but all of a sudden it's 3 times. We're like, that would send me over the edge as a parent, even if I knew, and I'm getting to see inside information. It's like, it seems like they're overly, go ahead, contact them.
I'm not a part of this presentation, but I'm inserting myself into it here. Yeah. One of the things with emails too is on the back end, and my department works with the data department on this, is we can see who has opened it and who has not opened it. And we've actually done some mining into that to try to increase our email engagement as we continue to build up the amount of our families who are receiving emails and have accurate emails. And we're over 80% now, and it's rising. When I started here, we were at about 59%. And at my very first big district leadership team meeting, I said, Barbara asked, well, how are you going to communicate? I said, we're going to send them emails. And Barbara said, you're not going to send them emails. I'm just looking at emails, and I was kind of taken aback. No, exactly how you said it. And so, but the amazing work of our data team under Julie's leadership has that up to where more and more are looking at it through email. The other concern with text message I want to quickly address is we're limited to 150 characters. And so when we're sending out a notification of this type, while it's not extensive, it doesn't need to be, with only 150 characters, it may leave someone receiving that text with more questions than answers, and we don't want to put them in that position either.
Okay. I've never sent a long message to my wife, so
So will students be issued technology devices? Absolutely. Thanks to all of you, we've been able to provide devices in grades 5 through 12, one-to-one. We have those on occasion that do decline to take one of ours and have decided to bring their own device. It was very exciting. Last Thursday night, we rolled out Sam Rayburn's laptops, and just a few weren't picked up. So it was great seeing all the parents, and it just went really smoothly. Very proud. As opposed to last year when we were still waiting for them to arrive. And then elementary campuses, what's been really nice with our ESSER funds as well is we've been able to standardize those classrooms. So every classroom will now have a cart. We've started with 18 in every CAL. However, as we've looked at the numbers coming in, we'll be making sure that every cart gets adjusted for the students that are in that classroom. And so we've had some really happy campuses over that you can have a student for a device and they know that that's theirs and you're not worried about sharing germs, that kind of thing. Anyway, we will continue, as Barbara mentioned earlier, having we call them our red tag machines. So if we have a little one that needs to be out for COVID, they'll be able to check out a device and take that home just to help see content and maybe stay on top of things that way. So, any questions about technology?
So last year, I think every time we had one of these updates, we would open it with, well, what we know today. And so I'll end with, what we know today is what we know today, but obviously we need to remain flexible. Dr. Whitbeck and the team continue to be engaged with local health authorities, cooperating school districts, A&M, and agencies, just to make sure we have all of the information we need to make informed decisions and to make informed recommendations to this Board of Trustees. And so we'll continue to do that. We'll continue to update you, and I can promise it will change after today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And as we move on, I just want to say that, there's much discussion on masks. It goes back and forth. We could just as easily have 3 parents in here being very adamant that their kids will never wear a mask. And I, not in any way trying to defend the governor, don't put me there. but the item was that it was your personal choice, right? It's your personal choice to wear a mask, it's your personal choice. Sometimes we get caught up on the COVID bill, and whether it's the mask, whether it's all of the cleaning that was done, whether it's the social distancing, or whether it was the shields that were put in place, how many COVID cases did it not, did we not have because of those things? I don't know. That's impossible to calculate. But I can tell you there was a tremendous fewer, doesn't sound right, cases of the flu. The flu was almost non-significant last year. And so pro-mask, against mask, whatever, you can't deny the fact that it did have an impact. The cleaning had an impact. And I don't think it was just the mask. I don't think it's just about the mask. I think it's about the whole program. And certainly all those things are still available and going on. And I think probably one of the things that we really ultimately want to watch out for is that anybody that wears a mask, feels just as comfortable as somebody that doesn't wear a mask. Because it is an environment that is shared, but it's also an environment where we all need to feel comfortable in that learning space. So, all right, with that, thank you. And we will move on to action items. Thank you. First is approval of the items listed on the consent agenda.
I move approval of all the items listed on the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Benford, a second by Ms. Waller. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Down to 8, discussion and or action, or let me say action on the regular agenda, business services.
Yes, sir. Thank you. We're here tonight again. Of course, this is our budget and tax rate adoption night. Our first item, as you said, is to look over the proposed budget for the 21-22 school year. We've already covered some of that with the public meeting. But just would mention some of the things that were included in the budget this year and go over just really quick our assumptions again. We did increase student enrollment growth by 100. Property value growth was 2.6%. We're looking at an M&O tax rate of 0.9518 and the debt tax rate of 0.275. Just a few of the additions and deletions or reductions that were in the budget for next year. We're looking at increasing the district contribution to employee health insurance premiums by $10 per month. Also increase this, as I mentioned, in premiums and property and casualty insurance. And then the salary and general rate increases, of course, raising the starting teacher salary to $48,000. And then for returning teachers, the salary step plus $1,000 for those people on the salary schedule, teachers, counselors, registered nurse, librarians. And then 3% general rate increase based on the midpoint for the eligible auxiliary transportation staff, paraprofessional and administrative and professional staff. And then, of course, we built a 10% reduction in all campus department budgets based on non-personal, and part of the reason for that was there was some ESSER funding that we could use in those areas to shore up that, so we weren't reducing, for example, campus-based expenditures in that, but it would come from a different funding source. And so that leads us to the general fund, $155 million revenue, total expenditures $158.5 million, and that negative $3.5 million on that. The debt service fund, a balanced budget on that, and the food service fund, and balanced on that. You might remember last year's food service had projected a negative budget last year due to the COVID and the changes that they had to make. And actually, a little bit later, we have in our budget amendment that they came back and actually will show an increase to budget to fund balance for the year. So that was an improvement on that.
I move approval of the recommended budget for the year ending August 31, 2022 for the general fund, debt service fund, and food service fund as presented.
Second.
I have a motion by Dr. Harlan, and I apologize, I was not looking at Dr. Davis. And a second by Dr. Davis. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Motion carries. And right along with that, approval of a resolution setting the tax rate for the Bryan Independent School District.
Yes, sir. Now that we've adopted the budget, now we have to go back and set the tax rate at the level that we need to support that budget. And that will be, with this resolution, the total tax rate of 1.2268. And for general fund purposes, maintenance and operations, that's 0.9518. 0.275 for the principal and interest in the debt service fund. And then I would mention that since this does raise, even though the tax rate is less by a little over half a cent from the 2020 rate, this does raise more taxes for maintenance and operations than last year's rate. So that has to be specifically stated by statute on the resolution.
I move approval of the property tax rate for 2021 to be set by the attached resolution at 0.9518 cents for maintenance and operations and 0.2750 cents for debt service for a total rate of $1.2268 per 100 evaluation as presented.
Second. Thank you for reading that.
Yeah.
Have a motion by Dr. Harlan, a second by Mr. Dwayne. All in favor?
Aye. Don't read the hard one.
Motion set. And discuss and consider approval of an adjustment to the minimum for pay grades C1 and X1.
Yes, sir. Y'all don't really know how much I love coming up and talking to y'all about money and things, because that's my world, and then I get to hear y'all try to go over those numbers, but it's good. I like it. Thank you.
It makes you happy.
I think he just made fun of us.
But I'm not real sure.
I would never do that.
He did.
I appreciate y'all very much. This item is one that came up as we were talking about our recent salary study and going forward. One of the recommendations, and we didn't bring it forward when we did the raises and things, for example, but we doubled back on this and reviewed it. One of the groups that we struggle with the most, and these positions are getting harder and harder to fill as well, but is our minimum pay grades, C1, which is clerical and instructional support, and X1, which is auxiliary support. And you may know our pay grade schedule, we have one for every employee in the district, and they all have a minimum, midpoint, and maximum based on that. But the minimum for these particular pay grades is right now $10 per hour. And what we're looking at and recommending is to move that to $10.50 per hour for those on that minimum scale. One of the things going forward too, and we'll bring it the next meeting, when we talk about insurance premiums and things like that, this would be an item that would greatly help that group as well to offset some of that we'll discuss at that point.
Well, I assume there's an X2 and a C2. What are those rates right now?
Yes, they start at roughly 11 to 11.25 an hour, I believe. So they're just slightly higher than that, and we may perhaps have to adjust a few people in those ranges, similar to what we had to do with the teacher salary schedule, because we don't want them to go over and above what some of the other ones in that next pay group are doing. So I believe the total cost of moving them up is somewhere in about the $30,000 range to make that adjustment, and the other adjustments that would be necessary to keep that all equitable.
And how many people are we talking about, Kevin? The exact, a roundabout number?
I don't know the exact number. I've looked at the schedule. I'm guessing I would say it's in the probably 25 to 30 people range that we'll have to adjust some. It's not a large group, but it is, it's important.
I move approval of the increase in the pay grade minimum for pay grades X1 and C1 from $10 per hour to $10.50 per hour as presented.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Mrs. Waller, a second by Mr. Stasny. All in favor?
Aye.
I don't know that gets as much attention. I'm glad y'all did address it, but I don't know it gets as much attention as all the other salaries we deal with on a very regular basis. So I guess next time around, and I think maybe that's what you were saying, I think we could benefit from a kind of an overview of all of those salary schedules, especially for the ones that are kind of the low end when insurance does impact it so much. So we'll save that for another day, of course, but I'd certainly be interested in seeing a little more about that and what others are doing and what we might be able to do, because as you just pointed out, that's not a huge impact on our budget to make that rather small change.
Right, and it will put us more in line with marketable with market in this area to hopefully be able to fill some of those jobs. I know Ms. Fryrear, some of her people that probably about half of the ones that will be affected are her food service workers. And I know she was saying she is having trouble and was worried she wouldn't be able to fill some of her positions this year. So it's just an attempt to try to help that and put us in a better position to move forward with that.
Next up is consider approval of a budget amendments for the year ended August 31st, 2021.
Yes, sir. And we have this year, a lot of times we will do an amendment for maybe one fund or two. Actually, this year with all the moving parts and things that have gone on, we're actually doing all three, and then plus transferring some funds in the assigned general fund and a couple of others just to shore some things up. One of the things is for the general fund, there's been a lot of movement as far as, we thought we had a lot of moving parts last year with the SACO loan and Corona relief funds and those kind of things. And of course, then we threw in another hailstorm and a freeze storm, and those kind of things are all, the timing of those from one year to the next creates some of these issues. But really for the general fund, adding in pretty much the CRF or the reimbursement for the technology and some of that had rolled over from one year to the next. Of course, the SACO loan, that's a big portion of it because that was completed this year. So we received all of those funds back, which is then converted into a long-term note payable. The payback on that is about eight and a half years. The other thing was insurance reimbursement. Some of those projects have overlapped from one year to the next. So, we may have received the reimbursement in 2020, but we're actually doing the work now in 2021 and finishing up some of those. And that was for the 2020 storm. Of course, now we have two more. So we're doing, we have received some of the reimbursement for the 21, the 21 freeze, but we're still going to be working on that going forward to next year. So that'll create the same kind of an issue next year as well. But those kind of additions and things that we've added, and then there's increase in TRS on behalf. A lot of those items, and I'm looking at the last page on that mainly to see some of the changes. And then there's some additions from the one-time payment, of course, in December for the stipend, and a difference in the payroll accrual. There's more or less calendar days this year. There happens to be more work days in the fiscal year than there was last year, so that creates a little bit of a timing issue too. So that's one of the movements. But when we take all of those into account and realigning some of those functions to match, if we go back to the very front page, it shows basically I think we're going to come out pretty close to break even with the general fund on this year. So that was, as we said, we passed a budget last year of about a negative 2.6, 2.7 million, I think. And so just kind of working through that. The other thing is the food service fund. They show there for other resources on that first page, 881,000. That's a reimbursement for last year's from TDA. You may remember they ended the year last year with I think it was about a $1.6 million deficit last year because of being closed and the way that things ended with COVID and that. So that's a reimbursement from the TDA that will come in this year. So it will go back in their fund balance. And we can actually see that. I don't have them numbered, so I'm sorry about that. I should have these numbered, but it's on the third page, the food service summary. We can see where the net effect on the fund balance for this year should be an increase of 588,000, and their fund balance previously was 1.688, and so they should end the year with approximately a $2.276 million fund balance again. So bringing that back to where it should be, or where it was before, in that area. That's one of the things she's always worried about. She has an excess fund balance. That's what she always got tagged for on TDA audits. So she kind of laughs that COVID took care of that problem. But we're just happy to get back to a good substantial base there. So she has a good fund balance to work with. One of the other items is on the following page after that. So it'd be page 4 on that we've talked about the group benefits risk pool has taken some hits. We talked about it a little bit in the last meeting. COVID, of course, is one of the items which we can reimburse the COVID expenditures for the plan out of ESSER funding. But there's also, we've had a large run of high-cost claimants this year. Some of it was COVID related, but some of it was not. And so in order to put that group benefits risk pool back on its feet, so to speak, we're recommending in a transfer, there's on that page you can see there's 2.3 million COVID related expense reimbursement through ESSER we've already applied for. We also have assigned in reserve in the general fund $1 million, which we're recommending we transfer that. And then we have in the workers' comp fund also, we have about 3.2 million. That's the schedule right above that. So we're recommending transferring that 2 million from there, leaving that with about 1.2 million at the end of this year, which we feel is a sufficient fund balance to carry that fund going forward and continuing on. So that would bring us back, transferring those funds would bring us back to, we feel, pretty close to a break even on the group benefits risk pool at that time, at the end of the year. And then we'll come back, we'll discuss, and we've talked a little bit at the last meeting about premium increases, and we've increased the district share a little bit, and so we're still examining this. We've had an actuary actually look at our plan and give us some recommendations of things to do, so we're still looking at that and seeing where we go. But even as an actuary, the part of the problem is in looking at that is this was such an extraordinary year. How do you determine, what expenses will go forward? And they have estimates. That's what they do for a living. So they have estimates of how much COVID expenses and how much of our other related expenses that they'll use for the, for the future years. So then we have to try to, come up with the numbers that make sense to try to shore that up. I mean, one of the things we want to make sure is that we keep our self-insured plan, and work to make it stable, because if we, at this point, if we go off of that, one of the options we looked at, for example, is TRS Active Care. And a similar one we talked about to our gold coverage plan. In the family coverage, if we switched from where we are with our plan to the TRS Active Care, the premium rate for that family group would go up about $600 above what it is right now. So,
I'm sorry, I know that's a amendment here for the healthcare, but
correct.
we're talking the next year's policy will be at the next board meeting,
We're
correct?
getting off track. Yes, sir. Sorry.
Okay, no worries. I was starting to get
Yep.
confused about
No.
which one we were here. I just wanted to make sure that we're not
No.
overstepping there.
No, you're correct. Sorry.
I move approval of the budget amendments for the year ending August 31st, 2021, as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Dr. Davis, a second by Mrs. Dwayne. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. And next up is the commitment of fund balance. Year ending August 31st, 2021.
Yes, sir, and this is, according to policy, we review this every year, the fund balance reserve, and we looked at it for this year, and of course, last year, remember, we utilized part of that, the $1 million for technology, so that we could move forward with online learning, just as an example. And this year, one of the items that we've recommended is to transfer the $1 million that's in reserve there assigned to the group benefits risk pool. And then we're recommending also replacing that. So we would stay at the same total assigned fund balance of $6,250,000. And I'll just remind in the resolution it states that, but the group benefits risk pool, the workers' compensation fund, and also the campus activity funds are three items that are completely 100% funded. If there's a negative, they would be funded through fund balance. So they're completely carried by that. And then the other items that we have on there is technology, which we've used before for property and casualty insurance. If we would have a catastrophic disaster, being able to move on that quickly and take care of things. Maintenance projects for unforeseen damage or malfunctions that needed to be quickly fixed to facilitate keeping school in session and learning happening, and then the group benefits risk pool.
I move approval of the attached resolution committing fund balance for the year ending August 31, 2021, as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Dr. Harlan, a second by Ms. Binford. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, and
Kevin, I guess you thought that was pretty exciting stuff, huh?
Yeah, that's the good stuff. I don't know what y'all, the rest of it, but I guess we have to do the rest too, right?
I tell you what, I'm sorry, I was trying to get down because we've been going about 2 hours and 15 minutes. Let's go ahead and take a 10-minute recess if there's no objection.
We're almost there.
I know we're almost there,
Okay.
but we're
Yeah.
dropping
whatever
like
you want.
flies, so we can take a 5-minute recess.
Round, it was done. I know Mr. Windsor had Sol Ross and
Okay.
SFA when they were built, the Rudder CT, those were all commissioned projects
So
as well.
just very quickly, I know we're trying to get wrapped up here, but very quickly, what do they do?
They will go in and make sure, once everything's installed and through the process with plans, they will verify that the occupancy sensors work. They will verify that the systems are working as they're designed to work. And they will work hand in hand with our testing and balancing company when that comes about later on in this project to make sure that all of the systems are working as they're designed and that they meet energy code.
Okay. And again, we don't have any choice in this, or do we?
No.
Okay, all right. Settled. Because we pay all these other people to do.
Typically, what I found is commissioning ranges from 70 to 90 cents or so a square foot, and this one fell in around 75 cents a square foot. So it is on the lower spectrum. There is ways to lower that cost, but it is to do less commissioning and kind of, I guess, take the installer for their word that they put it in right. And personally, I'd rather know it's working right so that we, when we do open this building up, that we do have a efficient school as we possibly can.
Okay.
Makes sense.
I move approval of the building commissioning services for intermediate number 3 to EMA Engineering and Consulting in the amount of $115,000 as presented.
Second.
I have a motion by Dr. Harlan, a second by Ms. Waller. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. And I was informed on our break that 8A7, consider approval for the sale of surplus vehicles. None were over, none met the criteria to have to be brought toward the board. So we're going to go ahead and strike 8A7. And that will bring us into human resources. Consider stipend approval for the present and when attendance program.
Good evening. I'm here tonight to ask for your consideration for the employee attendance program that we call Present and Win to be considered as a stipend. I didn't ask that when I talked to you before for it to be classified as a stipend, but if we do say it's a stipend, it can be covered under ESSER funds. And just to remind you that the Present and Win is the attendance incentive program, or a program that recognizes and rewards teachers and instructional paraprofessionals for being in the class. And we know that we're dealing with students who have a learning achievement gap. And we know that having their teachers, their instructional paras with them as much as possible is going to enable us to help close that gap. And so that's where we're at. We're not asking our teachers or employees to come sick to school, but we do want them to come as much as possible and maybe consider those discretionary leaves at another time.
And so this is not a different thing, this is just changing
The funding.
the way we do it.
Yes.
I move approval of the recommendation to pay a stipend for classroom teachers and classroom paraprofessionals who qualify for the Present and Win program.
Second.
I have a motion by Dr. Harlan, a second by Ms. Swain. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
And I was happy to vote for it, but I do have one real quick question. Again, be quick. I don't remember the rules on carrying your time over from year to year. Are these people that say we might have taken off and they don't take off, are they going to be able to carry that over to the next year and then possibly use it? And it concerns me because if we discontinue the program, these people could have a lot of it banked up and then use it all in 1 year.
Right. Well, Mr. Stasny, I guess that in my world, I see a lot of teachers take off and they don't bank days. For example, me, I could be out a whole school year and I have enough days banked. If I got sick, then I could be on FML for a long time and I would still have days. But our newer generation, they get 10 days a year and they want to burn 10 days a year.
But we're trying to incentivize them not to do that.
Yes,
So
sir.
there is possible that even though we might save some money on subs, we may end up losing that money in the future if, let's say, we discontinue the program or whatever they're going to.
Well, possibly so.
Okay.
Or they would have days if they got sick and they needed to take a long time off.
Well, it's just something to think about for the future, but we've passed it and it's a deal, so I hope it works.
Thank you.
All right, the board will now convene in closed session to discuss the following items as allowed by Texas Government Code, Chapter 551.074. No voting will take place in the closed meeting. Any action the board wishes to take as a result of discussion in closed session will take place after the board reconvenes in open meeting. It is now 8:27.